He treated his wife like a stranger until an accident made him fall in love with her all over again. London keeps its prettiest lies behind glass. Tonight it's the Hale penthouse, floor-to-ceiling views of the Thames, a dining table that seats 12, and two people eating in whispers. Victoria sets the cutlery just so. Old habit, old hope. Alexander doesn't look up. You change the flowers. Peonies felt softer. We're not running a cottage, he says without malice, without warmth. He scrolls. The glow of his phone paints his cheekbone in cold light. She tries again. Your mother called. She asked if we're still coming to Surrey this weekend. I'll have legal on Saturday. He lifts the glass, stops. Did you speak to Eliza about the gala? Her smile falters. Eliza, his PA, knows every hour of him that Victoria doesn't. I sent the approvals. He nods, satisfied, the way he nods at quarterly reports. Somewhere in the room, the clock ticks like a patient heartbeat. She watches him eat without tasting. They used to talk here. Now the silence has furniture. Alex? Her voice is a thread. If you're going to end it, don't let me find out from accounting. His gaze finally meets hers. Midnight eyes, expensive and unreachable. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't lie. We'll talk after my meeting. There it is, the weather report of a marriage. Cold front, no chance of rain. He takes his jacket, slides a leather folder into his briefcase. The silver pen she gave him on their first anniversary gleams against black leather. He doesn't notice. He never notices. He pauses at the mirror, adjusts his tie, and in the reflection she sees a stranger wearing her husband's face. Don't wait up, he says, already gone in his tone. Be careful, she replies, already gone in her chest. The door clicks. The city exhales. She stands alone in a room built for applause. The peonies are blush and full, as if they know how to bloom in hostile weather. She touches a petal, whispers, stay. Down in the private garage, a driver opens the rear door. Alexander waves him off. I'll take it. Control is his favorite superstition. The car purrs up the ramp and into the night. London is slick and glittering. Rain not falling, just remembering how. At the first junction, his screen lights with a message from E. We both know you're happier when you choose you. He doesn't answer, but the corner of his mouth agrees. On Blackfriars, traffic stutters. He drums the wheel, checks the time, rehearses the conversation. Concise, courteous, final. Victoria, this marriage isn't sustainable. You'll be taken care of. He hates cruelty. He prefers clean edges. The light turns green. A lorry, impatient, angles wrong. A horn, too late. Headlights flare white. Then everything becomes sound. Metal shouting, glass exploding into 1,000 cold stars. The world spinning out of its lanes. Silence. Then the slow arrival of sirens. Red and blue painting the wet road in confession. At St. Thomas, corridors hum with fluorescent mercy. Victoria arrives breathless, coat thrown over silk, hair damp from a rain she doesn't remember walking through. Alexander Hale, she says at the desk, words tripping over fear. My husband. Accident, stabilized. CT. Words come like stones, but she catches all of them. Her hands don't stop trembling until she sees him. Pale against white, a bruise already blooming like storm cloud across his temple. She takes his hand. It's warm. Tears threaten, then fall. Quiet, unprofessional. Perfect. Alex, she whispers. Please. Machines tick their cautious lullaby. He stirs. Lashes flutter. The eyes she knows open, clear, searching, unguarded. He blinks at the ceiling, then turns to her. The room sharpens into one person. Am I? His voice is sand and sleep. Are you my wife? She nods. Too fast. Too broken. He studies her like a masterpiece he's never seen. Awe softens his mouth. God, he breathes, whisper light and reverent. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever woken up to. The clock on the wall forgets to tick. Somewhere, a machine remembers how. And for the first time in years, the word wife sounds like a promise in his mouth. London's winter sunlight slipped through the hospital blinds, pale and gentle, like a truth that hadn't found its voice yet. Victoria sat beside his bed, untouched coffee cooling in her palms. Alexander lay quiet, asleep but peaceful. No tension between his brows, no distance in his jaw. He looked young again, like the boy she fell for before the world taught him to weaponize silence. A soft knock. Nurse Amelia entered with a chart. He's responding well. The memory loss is partial. Recent years are foggy. Emotionally significant events may take longer to return. Victoria hesitated. Emotionally significant? The nurse offered a kind smile. Sometimes the heart remembers before the mind does. Victoria didn't know whether to be terrified or grateful. By afternoon, Alexander was awake, sitting upright, eyes brighter than any morning she could remember. Was I, he asked softly, a good husband? The question punched the air from her chest. Her throat tightened. You had demanding years. The company, your responsibilities. He watched her, uncertainty flickering in those eyes that used to be steel. I feel like I failed you, he said quietly. Victoria froze. Alexander Hale, apologizing. That alone felt like witnessing snow in July. She tried to stand, hide the tremble in her breath. He caught her hand gently. Please don't leave. Your presence. He paused, searching. It makes me feel safe. Safe. A word he had never given her. A word she had forgotten belonged to marriage. She sat again. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was soft, like a blanket laid over decades of coldness. Tell me about us, he said. She blinked. Us? Yes. A tentative smile. How did we fall in love? Victoria's heartbeat stuttered. The truth, or the version she wished were true? She spoke carefully. We met at a charity gala. And did I know? He asked. Know what? That you were it. She swallowed. Not at first. He leaned forward, eyes fixed on hers. But I know now. Victoria's eyes filled before she could stop them. He wiped her tear gently with his thumb. Please don't cry. The tenderness in that touch nearly destroyed her. Later, she helped him walk down the hospital corridor. His arm around her waist felt different, protective instead of possessive. They passed a window overlooking the city. He stopped. Have I kissed you since waking up? He asked, tone innocent but disarming. Victoria inhaled sharply. No. A slow, reverent smile curved his lips. May I? She stepped back instinctively. He froze, pain flashing across his face. I'm sorry, he said instantly. I don't want to rush anything. It's just... He looked down. Every time I look at you, I feel something in my chest I can't put into words. She stared at him. This was everything she ever wanted, from the mouth of the same man who once made her feel invisible. Now he looked at her like she was oxygen, and she didn't know how to breathe. That night she returned home to grab clothes. In the drawer she found the divorce papers, signed by him, dated 2 days before the accident. Her hand trembled as she held the papers while replaying his voice. Was I a good husband? When did I realize you were it? May I kiss you? Victoria clutched the papers, dropped to her knees and whispered into the cold silence. He forgot he wanted to leave me and fell in love with me instead. The real question now wasn't whether he remembered her. It was, if he remembers, will this love vanish with his memory? Or has fate given her a man she was meant to meet for the very first time, years after their wedding? The Hale penthouse was a museum of wealth, glass, chrome, silence. But tonight it held something it hadn't in years. Laughter. Not loud, not uncontrolled, just a soft, uncertain tremor of joy coming from the man who once measured words like currency. Alexander sat at the marble kitchen island, sleeves rolled, eyebrows drawn together in concentration as he attempted to whisk eggs. Victoria watched from the doorway, arms crossed, unable to hide her surprise. "Am I doing this wrong?" he asked, glancing up like a guilty schoolboy. "You always look at me that way when I've miscalculated something." She blinked. You never cook." He smiled a little too proudly. "Then maybe it's time I start doing things I should have done all along." She moved closer, not trusting her legs fully. "What things?" she asked softly. He set the whisk down, met her eyes. "Things that make you smile." Her breath left her. This man, this version of him, was falling in love with her, freely, without history, without ego. He reached for a glass, poured orange juice, handed it to her like it was a love letter. "You're staring again," he murmured. "You keep surprising me," she whispered. He leaned forward. "Is that a good thing?" She couldn't answer, not because she didn't know, but because the truth was too dangerous to speak aloud. Later that evening, they went through old photo albums he'd requested. He paused on a picture of their wedding day. He studied her face, not his, hers. "You weren't happy," he said suddenly. She stiffened. "What?" He touched the image. "Your smile didn't reach your eyes." "Why?" She closed the album gently. "Everyone expects wedding days to be a fairy tale." She forced a smile. "Sometimes they're just heavily photographed negotiations." He stared at her, a flicker of something darker in his gaze. "Victoria, was I cruel to you?" She didn't answer. Silence said enough. His hand trembled slightly. He closed his eyes, exhaling deeply, as if a shadow passed over his mind. A vision, a flash, a glass shattering against marble. Her flinching, his voice, cold as a blade. Her heart jumped. Is he remembering? He opened his eyes. "I don't want to be that man," he said, voice low and shaking. "Whatever I was, however I failed you, I swear to you, I will spend every day I'm alive loving you better than I did yesterday." A tear broke loose down her cheek. This wasn't scripted romance. This was the apology she had begged the universe for, delivered by a version of him untouched by pride. She took his hand. "For the first time in a long time," she whispered, "I feel seen." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it, not out of ownership, but reverence. They sat in that moment, two people finally facing each other, not their history. But across the room on the dining table, a folder sat slightly ajar, the divorce papers, still waiting, still signed, still real. Victoria watched his profile in the dim light. Alexander had lost his memory, but the past had not lost him. And as long as those papers existed, love was not their only visitor. Truth was coming, and truth never knocks when it enters a home. It breaks the door. Rain slid down the floor-to-ceiling windows like falling arguments, silent, unstoppable, gathering weight. Alexander stood in the living room, one hand braced against the glass, watching the storm. His reflection stared back, no longer the cold tycoon, Not yet the man he was becoming. Someone in between. Someone rising. Behind him, Victoria approached quietly, carrying a soft blanket. "You'll catch a chill," she said gently. He glanced back, smiled that new smile, the one that started in his eyes before reaching his lips. "Would you warm me if I did?" Her breath caught. These little things, the teasing, the softness, were undoing her carefully built walls, thread by thread. She draped the blanket over his shoulders. He caught her wrist. Gently. "Stay." She stayed. They stood in silence, heat gathering in the small space between their bodies. He turned to face her fully. "Every moment I spend with you feels like a memory I'm supposed to remember." "Maybe it is," she whispered. A tension, warm and fragile, shimmered between them. He lifted a hand to her cheek, slowly, as if asking permission. She didn't move. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "Victoria," he murmured, "I don't know what love looked like before, but I know what it feels like now." She closed her eyes, tears catching on her lashes. "Please don't say it," she thought. "Not yet. Not until I know it's real." His lips parted as he leaned in. Ding dong. The doorbell's sharpness shattered the moment. Victoria stepped back, heart pounding. Alexander frowned. "Are we expecting someone?" "No," she whispered. "We are not." She moved toward the door like someone approaching a cliff edge. She opened it, and the past entered. Eliza stood there, perfect, composed, umbrella dripping with rainwater, blue eyes assessing like a predator in silk. "Hello, Victoria," she said, voice too smooth to be kind. "I came to see Alexander. He hasn't returned my calls." Alexander appeared behind Victoria, confusion etched across his features. He stared. Something flickered in his eyes. A shadow. A memory trying to claw back into existence. His breath hitched. His hand slipped from Victoria's. "Eliza?" he asked slowly. Her smile widened, like a blade sliding free of its sheath. "There you are," she said softly, stepping inside as if she owned the air itself. "Darling, we have so much to discuss." About us, Victoria's pulse throbbed behind her ears. U.S. The word detonated in the room. Alexander glanced at Victoria, a silent plea for explanation. "Do I know you?" Eliza laughed. "Know me?" "Alexander, you were going to leave her for me." The words crashed into the room, scattering the fragile peace they had built. Silence. Victoria stood still, shoulders lifted, tears unshed, dignity weaponized. Alexander staggered backward as if struck. His mind flickered. Visions of hotel rooms, whispered promises, lies spoken like vows. He clutched his head. "Stop," he muttered. "Please, I can't." Victoria stepped forward. "Alex?" He looked at her, eyes full of pain, confusion, something breaking. "I don't remember her," he said softly, voice trembling. "But my body does." "And that terrifies me," Victoria's heart cracked. Not from betrayal, but from the tragic truth. He was falling in love with her in the present, while being haunted by the sins of a man he could no longer remember being. And somewhere between those two men, she didn't know which one would survive the night. Hospitals repair bodies. Memories repair themselves. Alexander sat in the therapist's office, fingers clenched, breath uneven. Across from him, Dr. Langley observed quietly, the kind of silence that waited for truth to arrive. "We'll begin simple," the doctor said. "Tell me the first image that comes to mind when you hear your wife's name." Alexander closed his eyes. Light. "And when you hear Eliza?" A pause. Muscle tension. Jaw tightens. "Fire," he whispered. The doctor nodded. "Light warms. Fire consumes. but both are hard to forget. Meanwhile, in the penthouse, Victoria stood at the same window where he once kissed her. The storm had passed, but clouds still pressed low against the city. Eliza's words still echoed. You were going to leave her for me. And now, Alexander's choice wasn't defined by emotion, but by which version of himself would return. The man whose memory was gone, or the one who left her long before his accident ever happened. Victoria braced her hand against the glass. He had once promised her forever, and then forgot that promise when his life became a gallery of ambition. Now fate had pressed rewind, just to see if she would break at the same moment again. Hours later, Alexander returned. He stepped inside quietly. Eliza was gone. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of questions, fear, longing. Victoria turned slowly. He looked different, as if something behind his eyes had shifted into focus. His voice, when it came, was soft, dangerous. I remember things. Victoria's breath stilled. He walked toward her, slowly, each step heavy with ghosts. I remember tonight. This room, my suitcase packed. She closed her eyes. And I remember, his voice wavered, I told you, this marriage is no longer a partnership. It's a performance. She flinched. Tears gathered in his eyes, not from sadness, but shame. I remember, he said again, as if confessing a crime. I wasn't just going to leave you, I was going to humiliate you. Make your divorce public. Strip you of dignity so shareholders would favor me. Victoria clasped her arms around herself, as if to keep her ribs from collapsing. He stopped 2 paces away, close enough to reach, far enough to leave. I loved her, he said, voice hollow, or I thought I did. But when I woke up and saw you, I felt something I haven't felt in over a decade. Victoria looked up. Softness, reverence, hope. You, he said, tears falling now, felt like home. Silence. Every second was a lifetime. Finally she spoke, voice breaking. So who are you now, Alexander? The man who wanted to leave me, or the man who wants to love me? He stepped forward. Both, he said quietly, and that terrifies me more than anything. That night she slept in the guest room, by choice, not because she stopped loving him, but because she needed to see if his love would survive the return of his memory. Because love without memory is chance. Love with memory is choice. As she turned off the bedside lamp, she whispered into the darkness, God, if this is the last time I'll ever be his peace, make it count. Down the hall, Alexander lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He remembered everything now, and for the first time since the accident, he was afraid of losing her all over again. Morning arrived without sunlight, only silence. Victoria stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she couldn't taste. Today there would be no pretending, no borrowed peace, only truth. Alexander entered quietly. No suit, no watch. Just a man, barefoot, visibly shaken, carrying every mistake he had ever made in his eyes. He didn't speak right away. He just stood there looking at her as though seeing her for the first time and the last. Finally he whispered, May I sit? Victoria nodded. He sat across from her, elbows on knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. I remember everything, he said quietly. The man I was, the choices I made, the affairs, the divorce papers, the way I made you feel small in a house you built with your dreams. A tear escaped her eye. She didn't wipe it. And yet, he said, voice trembling, these last few weeks have been the happiest of my life, because I met you again. As if for the first time, Victoria inhaled sharply. He continued, that version of me, The one without memory loved you effortlessly, instinctively. That love was pure. And now, she asked, voice barely steady. He looked up. Now I love you deliberately, knowing what I've done, knowing who I was, knowing what I cost you. She clenched the mug to stop her hands from shaking. So what happens next, Alexander? He stood up slowly, walked to the counter, picked up a document, laid it in front of her. She froze. It wasn't divorce papers. It was a voluntary transfer agreement. All assets, shares, holdings, real estate, to her. Her eyes flew to his. This is everything, she whispered. His voice broke. Yes, because I need you to know, if you choose to walk away, you will be walking into power, into peace, not poverty. Tears flooded her eyes, falling freely. I don't want your money, she said. I wanted your heart. He stepped back, emotion raw in his eyes. And now you have a choice, he whispered. Not as my wife, not as someone trapped by vows or guilt, but as a woman who knows exactly what love requires and what it costs. He took a breath that trembled through his whole body. I will not beg, he said. Not because I don't love you, but because I love you honestly now. And honest love doesn't cage silence. Thick, beautiful, terrifying. Victoria rose to her feet. For a moment, neither moved. Then, she walked around the table, stood in front of him, their faces inches apart. Her voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of 10 years. I forgive you, she said. He closed his eyes, tears falling. I love you, she added. His breath caught. But I need to learn how to love myself again, too, she finished. His eyes opened. What she just gave him was not reunion. It was truth, healing, beginning. She stepped back. I won't leave, she whispered, but we will not pretend. We will rebuild from the ground. As strangers willing to fall in love twice, Alexander smiled through tears, a smile of surrender, not victory. He knelt, not in proposal, in peace, and she took his hands, not to accept a marriage, but to begin one. Again. Some love stories don't end with a kiss or a walk into the sunset. Some end with a choice. To stay not because you have to, but because healing is worth fighting for. And sometimes the hardest person to forgive is the one you once promised forever to. But when memory returns and love remains, that isn't destiny. That is love choosing you back. The end.